Hello and welcome. Today we're going to do something a little bit different. Normally I talk about one topic, but today I want to talk about average party level in hardcovers for Adventures League, as well as I've been saying I was going to do it, so I'm going to do it. Leveling in Dungeon Crawl Classics from level 0 to level 1, and that's going to be an overview of what you need to do, and then we're going to start doing individual classes in Dungeon Crawl Classics. But first, let's talk about, because I didn't talk about this in my previous Adventure League um, videos, but let's talk about average party level and treasure points and how those things interact, because this is extremely important. Now, let's say, all right, now let's take a step back. Tables in Adventures League are going to be anywhere, on average, from 4 to 5 players, but the max you can have is 7. All right. Now, you will have a range of levels at a table. Where this will become important is, let's say you're playing something like the new book that comes out, and the level range for that is 1 through 5. Now, 1 through 4 is tier 1, and if you're in that range, then you're going to get tier 1 treasure points if that's your average party level. Now, let's say you're getting to the end of the book and you've got 5 players at the table who have gotten to level 5, so they're tier 2 players. But you have 2 seats that are open at your table, and you have 2 brand new players that come in. Now, those new players have to be allowed to sit at your table. I know they're going to be DMs, they're going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. But you can't. It's open play. And that's the risk you run in open play. You will have to seat those lower level players at your table as long as it fits within the tier of the book. And book tiers are different than play tiers. Play tiers, like I said, you've got 1 through 4 is tier 1, 5 through 10 is tier 2, 11 to 16 is tier 3, 17 to 20 is tier 4. If you're playing in expeditions modules, then those will adhere to the tiers of play. A hardcover does not have that limitation. It's like the last adventure that came out, Tomb of Annihilation. It was the suggested play was 1 through 11, so that was technically the tier for the book. And players from level 1 through 11 can come into that adventure at any time. It doesn't matter what the party level is. Level 1 players, brand new players, can come in. Granted, it's deadly for them, and they'll probably buy the farm coming in that way, but they can do it. So you don't have a reasonable reason to turn players away from a table. And honestly, if you're a DM or a coordinator and you're turning people away because they're not tier appropriate, you're not understanding how hardcovers are supposed to be played. Those first level players are tier appropriate for a level 1 through 11 adventure. But I'm digressing, so let's take a step back and talk about average party level. So again, let's go back to the new book coming out that's level 1 through 5. You've got 5 players sitting at a table that are level 5. You seat 2 new first level players in there. And what you've got, mathematically, the total of your party members is 27. Now you've got 7 of them. You divide that by 7, the total number, and this is how you get your average party level. 27 divided by 7, that's 3 point something. So your average party level is 3. Now, that average party level is a tier 1 party because that average falls within the levels 1 through 4. When treasure points are allotted to all of those players, the tier 1 players, the level 1, they're going to get tier 1 treasure points. Now, because the average party level at the table is 3, that means all treasure points, including the ones going to the level 5 players, have to be tier 1 treasure points. So, even though those players are technically tier 2, the average party level for play in that hardcover falls into play, and that average party level of 3 makes them tier 1 and makes the whole party tier 1, so the treasure points have to be given as tier 1. Now, I know there are people going, oh, I'm not going to screw my players over that way, blah, blah, blah. No, you don't have that as an option. There's no such thing as DM empowerment that allows you, or coordinator empowerment, that allows you to say, I'm not going to follow the rules. The rules are the rules, so those tier 2 characters for that 2 hours of play are going to get 2 tier 1 treasure points, and that's what they have to write down. So, I mean, this is one of the things that I thought was asinine about the treasure point system. And honestly, I've instructed all DMs that if they're going to play Adventures League, they can't opt out of the portions they find distasteful. And if they're playing a hardcover that has a level range that maybe encompasses 1, 2, or possibly 3 tiers of play, they don't get to tell me they won't take those tier 1 characters on a table full of tier 2 players, because that's not how hardcovers work. If it's a level 1 through 11, they have to take those first level characters if I need to fill seats, because I won't turn players away. And this is the other thing we have to think about as coordinators. If we're turning players away that legally could play at a table because we don't want to follow certain rules, we're not playing Adventures League. Nothing at your store is legal if you're doing that. Number 2, you don't want to do this because you're hurting the store. This is why. I end up getting, and it's ridiculous, I have a number system where I hand out. We've got numbers 1 through 30, and we go through all those numbers for our random walk-ins every week. We have 19 tables that have DMs and established players at all of those tables, and I fill in seats as I can. Every time I have to turn players away, that's a potential bad review for the store. Those bad reviews will impact the potential earnings of the store and their ability to stay open. So if you are doing things because you're being a bad coordinator or a bad DM and you're not following the rules and you're turning people away because you don't want those tier 2 players to be forced to get tier 1 treasure points, you're not doing your job. You are actually harming the store by creating, like in my case, I've had times where I've turned away a dozen people and I've explained to them why, and I guarantee you, I don't even bother looking at Yelp and stuff anymore, but I guarantee you that there are going to be negative reviews, even though I apologize profusely and I'm like, sorry, it's first come, first serve. We don't have enough seats or DMs. I don't even have room to put more tables. I guarantee you, you get bad reviews because of that. Now, if you're telling players or turning them away saying, well, those guys are all tier 2, you're tier 1, I can't put you there, when they probably know that you could put them there, that guarantees the store is getting a bad review and you're screwing the store over. So you have to, whether you like it or not, follow the rules. You have to seat those players at a table that they are legally able to sit at, regardless of whether a few people are going to be butthurt because they're not getting the tier of treasure points that their level would allow, as opposed to what the average party level allows. Now, if you have a staggered group, this is going to happen to them all the time, and your DMs have to do this. I mean, as DMs, you've got to sit down every day and calculate your APL that you're playing Adventures League in a hardcover and tell the table, these are the treasure points that you're going to get. And honestly, I think this should create more paperwork for you as a DM, because you should be writing down, this is what each player's gotten. My personal thing is, if I ever go to this, which I probably won't, I would have my computer there, or my tablet, a spreadsheet with the players' names, their DCI numbers, and I would put down how many points they got. If they've only played an hour, 57 minutes, they earn that 1 advancement point. I would track everybody's advancement points. I would track their treasure points in the tier so that players don't cheat. Because let's face it, players are going to cheat. They always have, they always will. I mean, that's why we've had loot runs and other bullshit like that happens in Adventures League over the years. You don't have that in a normal party that's just playing and having fun. There are no loot runs. It's just an Adventures League phenomena that is just ridiculous. But that's another point altogether. So, DMs, coordinators, you have to calculate average party level. You have to explain to your players that's going to be calculated, and they will have to take the treasure points at the tier that the average party level falls into, not the tier that their character falls into. Like it or not, that's what they have to do. If they don't want to do that, they tell them don't play Adventures League. It's that simple. But that's it for APL and Adventures League. Hopefully, I won't remember something else I should have put into a video and talk too much more about the Season 8 changes. I'm sure there'll be something that comes up, or if there's some questions that arise either in comments or people asking me at the store, I'll probably end up doing another video on it. But let's be honest, I really hate Adventures League at this point, and I won't be playing it or running it personally. I'll coordinate some tables on my Wednesdays, but like I said in my Twitter thing, I've got 4 DMs that are going to run out of 19. The other 15 are just going to run, not homebrew, they're going to run the hardcovers and modules that are out, but they're not going to play with Adventures League treasure points and advancement points anymore. They're going to run based on getting gold, getting treasure that's allotted in the book, no random tables and no freaking power gaming crap like that. So it's going to, I mean, it's going to kill AL at our store eventually because nobody wants to run it. And there are a lot of places out there. Here's the thing. I know that there are people like, oh, the number of people dissenting is small. No, it's not. When I've talked to my DMs, I've had them talk to me, relay to me what's been said to them in email. 170 people a week plus my DMs. I'm sorry. None of them want to play it, including the 4 tables that I'm making play it. I had a DM that was like, "Oh, we're going to play it because it's the rules." Then they read the rules. We had our meeting. We discussed APL, everything they have to do to follow the rules and be an Adventures League table. And some of them that were saying they were going to do it said, "No, I'm not doing it because that's just stupid." So AL is going to die, in my opinion, and that's a good thing. All right, let's move on to Dungeon Crawl Classics. I mean, this is my new obsession. I love this game just because it's brutal. It is absolutely old school. The system, I love the simplicity. I love the fact that race is class and that kind of stuff. And we're going to talk about that in a brief overview of leveling up. In my previous video, I talked about level 0 characters and going through basically meat grinder mode, which is starting off where every player at the table has 4 level 0 characters. They're all peasants. They all have their peasant occupations. They have their peasant tools as their weapons, and they suck at everything they do. And it's a thing of beauty because these villagers go off to rescue fellow villagers. And what will happen is you have the table of death or the pile of death. And what we ended up doing, because we printed out the 4 and everybody tore them up into individual sheets, and as each one died, they tore it up, threw it in the middle. We had this massive pile. I wish I had a picture of dead guys because some people lost all 4, and then when we found more villagers, they would get 2 more because there were enough to go around that I was able to fill out the holes. And once you got to the end, after they had gone through spare villagers, another room of spare villagers, and all their guys, some people had 1 level 0 character left, some had 2. No one had 3 or 4. I mean, the body count was worse than an Arnold film back in the 80s when you'd have like 80 guys dead. The body count was insane, and it was hilarious. It was so much fun. But after you get done the meat grinder, you then will take what you have left, that 1 or 2 characters, and level it up to level 1. Now, I chose, at first I was thinking I was going to make them pick a single first level character. This was a GM decision. But once I started looking at these first and second level adventures and how deadly stuff was, I mean, absolutely insane things that could come in and ruin an entire party and wipe them out. There was one room, I'm not going to say in what adventure, but basically it was the equivalent of a Star Trek room where the Horta came out, but there were 3 of them, and had a massive 30-foot cone attack that were attacking these first-level characters that had measly hit points. And it wiped out almost the whole table except that one guy that was positioned outside of that cone. And the funny thing is, what ended up happening, we had a lot of clerics. that was one of the characters that survived. He walks in and heals a cleric. The cleric walks over and heals a cleric, and they chain healed clerics, hoping to have the last cleric be able to heal a party member that wasn't a cleric because of the way the death things work. And we'll talk about that stuff in another video when we actually talk about clerics, because we're going to do class videos and race videos specifically. And I mean, it was horrible. They ended up a party of clerics at the end of this adventure. And fortunately for them, there were some more huts with villagers, and I let them bring in some level 1 characters. So when they went to the level 2, that was even more bloody, that they could whittle down to a single character that survived. And it really doesn't come down to a single character that they liked. It comes down to what survived. And some of these surviving characters are not good, but the people are still having such a blast playing. It's awesome. But let's talk about what you do with these level 0 characters. And this is just going to be a generic leveling up, and then we'll go into detail, like I said, when we talk about the thief, the wizard, the cleric, and the warrior, as well as the 3 races. But let's say you get done. And I love throwing this one out, but let's say you get done and you have an elven glassblower. These are your 2 guys that survived, and a gong farmer. Now, if your character has a racial designation, be it elf, halfling, or dwarf, that is what they will become. So that elven glassblower becomes an elf. An elf is a class. It's very old school, going back to Redbox D&D, where elves were a class. I mean, you had 3 simple alignments. I mean, that's what you have in this as well. You have 3 simple alignments. You have lawful, chaotic, and neutral. So if you have that elven glassblower, you are an elf. If you have that halfling moneylender, you are a halfling. And the dwarven whatever, you're a dwarf. Those are automatically picked for you. If you have one character survive and it has a racial designation, your character will be that race. And race's class is not horrible, because the halfling has certain advantages. They can automatically dual wield. Dual wielding relies on agility, but if your halfling has crappy agility, it doesn't matter. You're still, instead of, like, if you take something and you want to dual wield and you're a human, then you start going down the dice chain. And when you're rolling your main hand and your offhand, where your main hand, instead of being a d20, might be a d16, and your offhand, because your agility is so horrible, could be 2 or 3 down the dice chain. You could be rolling a d16 and a d10 to hit, which means you're probably not going to hit something with a high AC. So halflings have an advantage because they will automatically be rolling d16s and have a better chance. Also, halflings don't critically fail if they roll a single 1. They're lucky. So they have to roll on their 2d16s 2 1s to critically fail. If you roll 1 critical fail and you roll a critical success, that crit counts, the critical failure gets put aside, and you get to do your crit damage and all the other stuff on the one that did it, because you are lucky. You have all these nice things you get as a halfling. Elves are nice because they're kind of like warriors, and they're kind of like casters. They get some spell casting. As a bonus, they get their, what is that thing called? Their patron. And patrons can be good. You can ask for help from a patron, and if you get your patron spell, the patron spells are, if you roll a 27 on that first table when you're rolling your spells out, and it says patron spell, oh my God, the patron spell, when my son had it, it was just wrecking. But you take a ding when you use the patron spells, but we'll talk about that later when we get to wizards and patrons. But the elves get a patron automatically. That's a bonus they get. Plus, they get to be a warrior and a caster, all in one nice little package. I mean, they're not as powerful as a straight warrior, and they're not as powerful as a straight caster, but they get to be both, which is nice. It's almost like the elf is a multi-classed character. Dwarves, they get some of the benefits of warrior because they'll get their heroic deed die. And they get to be a dwarf. And the dwarves are pretty cool. They can smell gold. There's all kinds of stuff. Now, let's move to that gong farmer. The gong farmer, and here's the thing. I'm not saying this because I suggest using stats to power build. Because power building is really not a thing. You random roll in this, so you could end up, if personality is your only good stat, it makes sense to be that cleric because personality is their stat. If you have a broad spectrum of stats that are average, then you have more freedom. Or if you have one or two stats that are, let's say you've got two stats that are good, maybe give you a +1, that might give you some choices as to what to do. But it's possible that you could end up being a really bad rogue because you have no good stats. And your best stat, let's say you've got all horrible stats, and this guy survived, but he's lucky as hell because the dice didn't hate him. But this guy survives. The best thing he has is like 8 in his agility because he rolled like crap, and this guy survived. Um, he's a really bad rogue. That's what he is. Or you can choose to make him a really bad something else and just hope he dies, and your GM lets you take another character. Which they always will, because you always run into peasants that say, these are peasants for a potential new character. But and I handle it probably differently than other GMs do because I don't want players to be too far behind. My table right now is level 2. If somebody dies and they bring somebody in, I let them bring it in one level behind the table, or one level behind the adventure level. So I don't make them work up from a level 0 or level 1, and I won't do it when they're higher level. But that's a GM choice. This is a game where it says the GM decides how things work, and that is the end decision as to how the tables run. So it's not like AL where we have set rules, but I'm not talking about that. Screw AL. But whatever your main stat is on that gong farmer is probably going to determine what you are. So if you've got a real high intelligence, you're probably going to pick a wizard. And a real high intelligence makes your wizard really good. So you really get benefits out of that. If you have a high intelligence and everything else sucks and you decide to be a rogue, that intelligence is not going to help on your checks being a rogue. So it's not a matter of power building or doing something. I make the decision when I do these to suggest that you pick your class around your stats, because you'll have more fun. Now, there's the rare breed of player that really likes to have a character idea in their head, and regardless of their stats, they'll build that character. So it doesn't really matter how bad they are. They may choose to be a warrior who sucks because, maybe their backstory, that's their family tradition, and everybody goes off and they're a warrior, and it doesn't matter that you've got a 6 strength and a 5 constitution. You're going to do what everybody else has done. And it can make for some fun play, but it's hard for a lot of players to stomach not being able to hit and not being able to do damage. So I'm not a proponent of power building. I absolutely hate it. That's why we play DCC. And there's no such thing as power building in DCC. So picking a class around your stats is not power building. It's building a rational character that has a higher chance of surviving. So, and DCC is a survival game. You're trying to survive all these god-awful things that are getting thrown at you. And if you have that bad con, here's the thing. Like, I have that one player who has a halfling. They had a really good halfling, and he died. And then they got another halfling. This one has negative con, or had negative con from the start. So at second level, he has 5 hit points. Now, because of that, almost anything that attacks him puts him down. So he hides a lot and hopes he can get around and get an attack in on something that has lost a lot, taken a lot of damage, and maybe take it out. So what's really happened is he's gotten murdered so many times. He's at like -3 on his con. His hit points are going down, and each time you die, your con goes down a point. You know, if you're knocked down below 0 and somebody brings you back up, that's traumatic. You lose con, and this character, he's going to hit 0 con and just be perma dead eventually. But hopefully, because he really likes the halflings, hopefully he random rolls another halfling and can get a decent one this time. But you know, it is what it is. It's that roll 3d6 down the line and play that random character and have a ball. But yeah, stats are kind of important in this when you choose your character so it doesn't suck and has survivability. And you have to look at DCC as a survivability game. So if you have that high intelligence, let's say you've got my son and his character died, had something where he rolled an 18 intelligence, and that's really powerful. That +3. He had a lot of spells, a lot of languages, a lot of stuff that made him really good. He got the patron bond, and then he rolled and got the patron spell. And that thing was just a wrecking crew as a wizard. If he would have chosen something that wasn't stat appropriate, the party probably would have died a good while before, and it would have been restart with another level 0 campaign. So it really comes into play with a game like this where survivability, especially at low levels, is low, and you need to play smart to put those stats into the class that they belong so that the party survives as well as yourself. Um, and even with good rolls in those stats, our party has a lot of trouble. But again, I'm not saying don't go with your build. If that Gong Farmer has an 18 intelligence and you want to make him a warrior with an 8 strength, go for it. I'm just telling you, don't be disappointed when he dies horribly and your party goes down because you opted for role play instead of helping the party. So, again, I have to stress DCC is not a power building game. You can't power build in this thing. So, picking something that makes sense isn't power building, it is cooperative gaming. That's the best way to put it. You're helping your party by making yourself useful. And I really do think that intentional bad characters have no place at a table in most cases because they end up harming the party. So I'm not saying in any game system power build. I'm just saying don't make an intentional shitty character that automatically screws the party over all the time. You can't do anything. You're absolutely useless because then you come off as a troll at the table. And at my table, you get asked to leave if you do that kind of stuff because the party doesn't put up with dying because you want to troll them. So, think about the people you play with when you build your character. But let's go back to that Gong Farmer. If he has awesome strength and hopefully good con, that's a warrior. No doubt about it. If he has agility and maybe nothing else, that's a rogue. And rogues are useful. I mean, you need to find traps. You need to do all these things that skill set goes for you. Because don't forget, you don't have skill checks in DCC. What you have is granted to you by your background as a peasant. So if you were a gong farmer who becomes a cleric or a warrior, there is no reason for you to assume that you can pick a lock or find a trap. It's not in your background. You spent your life digging up. A gong farmer deals with turds. You dug up turds. There was no trap finding. There was no lock picking. You don't have the skills. So you can roll for it, but you're rolling a d10 instead of a d20. Where if you had agility and you took the rogue, you're rolling a d20 because you have the skill set to pick a lock, find a trap, disable a trap, all that good stuff. So it's not like D&D where everybody gets to do whatever they want. And I mean, as a DM, I never let everybody do whatever they want. I don't let everybody roll to pick a lock because everyone can't pick a lock. That's a specific skill set. And there's no reason to assume that a warrior would have wasted time training to pick a lock instead of training to kill things and survive because he's a frontline combatant. Um, that's the job that falls to the rogue, and that's the way I play it when I'm playing D&D. If it's not a trained skill, you don't get to do it, and I don't care if people like it or not. That's how I play. And the beauty of that is with DCC, if you don't have the skill set, you're rolling a d10 instead of a d20, and you are probably going to fail. So it encourages a well rounded table. So if you are that stat that has agility, you should take the rogue so the table's well rounded. Um, if everybody else has strength and stuff and you have intelligence, you should take the caster so the table's well rounded because the table needs that wizard. They really do. Our table hasn't had someone who could be a wizard in a few sessions because they've died. Now someone's picked up a wizard and it will help them again and it increases their survivability. If you have personality, yes, you should take that cleric because here's the thing with clerics, you level up, you take your cleric. Every time you fail a spell, your disapproval will go up. So instead of a critical failure being a 1, let's say you fail your spell, you don't lose it like a wizard does. Your disapproval goes up 1. Now your critical fails are 1 and 2. And I've had the party go as high as someone who had disapproval at 9. So 1 through 9 was a critical failure, and they have been hurt so bad by that because let's say you roll an 8 and you've got a disapproval of 1 through 9. That's 8d4 you roll on the table. Those big numbers will hurt you. Horrible things happen to the clerics where you lose the ability to heal, you have to go on a quest, all this kind of stuff because the gods in this game hate everybody, including their clerics. They're petty little jerks. And what's the last class I left out? Rogue, warrior. I mean, you've got those four. Use your stats appropriately. If now here's the thing. Let's say you've got 2 or 3 players at the table, two, and all of them have, for some reason, strength and con as their stats, and you want to make something that is off stat. Discuss it with the table. Say this is what I'd like to do, and if it's not going to hurt the table, then it's all good. And that's another thing that I'm a proponent of. Your party should discuss at the beginning your party build, and that doesn't happen in D&D anymore because of all these power builds that roll around. I've had 3 power builds sit down at a table, the exact same class and build, and then they all wonder why they die when they don't have casters that can do AoE spells, and they don't have a cleric who can actually heal. They have like a half a cleric and a druid or some, other crap that doesn't do the job that those classes would do. And it applies to DCC, honestly, more because your survivability can be so low. So you should always sit down with the group. I really believe instead of building characters at home, they should be done at the table. I carry 3 books with me because the DCC book is cheap at $39. Yeah, I know it's not cheap, but compared to $60 per book for D&D where they fall apart, where DCC has awesome construction of their books, $39 is a bargain. And if you get the paperback, it's even less. So, if you can pick up a couple of copies, have them at the table, and always have the players level up and build their characters at the table so they can discuss what they're going to do. Now, if you're playing online, something like Roll20, you should have a session 0 when you go from those level 0 characters to first level, because that's just, I consider the level 0 session a character building session, because that gives you what you have left, and then from there you level up. So at the beginning, after your meat grinder, you really should have a session 0 where everybody discusses what they're going to do, and hopefully the players are like, well, there's a hole in our group. Can somebody needs to do this? You know, you have the stat. Can you take that? A well-rounded party, I don't care what the game is absolutely essential if you're going to survive. And in DCC, where it's so brutal and survivability can be so low, it is essential that you have a well-rounded party. So when you're going from level 0 to level 1, I highly recommend have your characters discuss what they're going to do, stress the lethality of the system so that they actually think about playing a well-rounded party. And hopefully you have some players that are relatively selfless, and even though they're not used to playing a certain class, if their stats say that's the class they should do, they'll do it, if especially if they're the only one that can take that class, so your table survives. Because let's face it, in a lethal system, there is nothing that's going to kill a table, and I mean make that table break up and not want to play anymore. Nothing that'll kill a table more than everybody dying over and over and not being able to progress. And honestly, if you're a player, if you don't play cooperatively and help build out a well-rounded party, you deserve to die because you made poor choices. It's not the GM's fault. It's not the game system's fault. And that's where players fail as players. They will always blame someone other than themselves. They will blame the GM for the table wiping. They will blame the system for the table wiping. When in reality, if everybody took warriors, there's no clerics, there's no casters, there are no rogues, so traps are killing everybody. That's the player's fault. You have to make a well-rounded party and work together. That's the idea of adventuring, working together to meet a goal, and part of working together is creating a well-rounded party. So use those stats, create a good party, level up appropriately, and remember, once you've picked your class, or once your class has been chosen for you because you have a racial designator, there is no multi-classing. You are an elf from level 1 through 10. You are a warrior from level 1 through 10. You can't multi-class. So pick wisely, level up taking into account what the table needs, not necessarily what you want, and have fun. And let's be honest, I'm the kind of player where I always, when I sit down at a table, I ask what everyone is. And once I know what role has not been filled, I will fill that role regardless of whether it's a class I'm comfortable playing or not. I mean, I really hate playing casters, but I will play a caster if it's necessary at a table because it's needed. And if there's no cleric there, I mean, I've always been a horrible cleric because I will go into combat and still play like a tank and end up having to heal myself and that kind of crap. But I tried to work away from doing that to actually healing the party. But it's a class I don't like to play, but I will fill that role so the table survives. And I've adjusted my gameplay as such over the years so that the party can survive. So I really encourage players to do the same thing. Sit down and ask. Don't just sit down and say, I'm going to play this. Sit down and ask, what is everybody? And then honestly look at yourself and say, this is really what they need. I'm going to play it. So don't be a selfish player because it only hurts the party. And unfortunately, I see too many selfish players sit down at tables. Um, I do my best as a GM to not allow it to happen. I'll be like, we need this role filled. Who's going to fill it? And if they hem and haw, I'm like, if this role it doesn't get filled, you guys will die. I mean, I stress it because it never fails. If the role's not filled, they'll die. And in DCC, it is inevitable. If you don't have more than one cleric in the party, you're probably going to die. If you don't have that caster, you don't have that rogue, you will die. So when you sit down with those level 0 characters and have to decide what I'm going to do with it, you need to really think, what does the party need? How will I best aid the party in advancing and surviving? And that's the best advice I can give any player or any table. Ask yourself every time, what does the group need and what will help everyone reach their goals and survive? And if everyone at the table does that, you'll have a perfect party and you'll probably have more fun than you're having right now. So, you know, best advice I can give, don't be a selfish player. When you go from 0 to 1, talk with everyone and make a well-rounded party. All right. So next week I'll pick a class randomly, and we'll talk about how you level that class up in DCC. Because there are a lot of things that we've had misunderstandings with, like with wizards. Someone made the assumption that if they had a certain spell, they would get another spell automatically and a third spell automatically, and it didn't work that way. So building each class, some classes are more difficult than others, but you need to look at the rules and not make assumptions. So we'll talk about one of them next week. Not sure. I may start with the one that was most problematic and work towards the ones that are more obvious and easy. But we will do some specific class building next week, and hopefully we're done with our AL discussions. But that's it for today. Remember to comment down below, rate, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thumbs down if you don't like what I'm saying. I don't really care. It's all good. But we will see you next time. Have an awesome week.